Welcome to the 2020 Workshop for Young Leaders in English Teaching. My name is Tom Toomey, and I'll be one of the teachers you'll be seeing in the next few days during our time together. This is the first time we are doing the workshop online, so congratulations for being the first virtual WYLET class. In my first session, I'm going to talk to you about classroom management and motivation. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of language teaching, it's important to set a foundation on the type of classroom you would like and the learning experience you want to give your students. By the end of this session, you will be able to identify the 7 learning styles, strategize how to teach students with different learning styles, understand how to create a student-centered classroom, and learn effective classroom management skills. So grab your pen and your notebook and let's get started. Language learning, as you may recall from your own experience, can be a daunting task for many students. It's important that teachers create a learning environment that makes their students comfortable and want to learn. When students are relaxed and engaged in the classroom, their motivation to learn increases. That's something to keep in mind when setting up your classroom. Here's some vocabulary I'll be using, which you can take note of as I'm explaining. The first one is student-centered, which refers to a classroom that focuses on the student. Next is teacher-centered, which means a classroom that focuses on the teacher. The third term is experiential learning, which is defined as learning through experience. Meaningful learning is learning that connects with real-life issues. Next up is motivation, which is the general willingness or desire to do something. And lastly, reflection, which means to think back on something in depth. Before we discuss classroom management, I wanted to talk about learning styles. Many people recognize that they learn in different ways. Everyone has a mix of learning styles. Using multiple learning styles in the classroom is a relatively new approach, but an important one. Understanding how your students learn can help you as a teacher reach your students more effectively. There has been much study done into how people learn, and it has been synthesized into 7 different styles: visual, oral, verbal, physical, logical, social, and solitary. Let's now look at these 7 styles. The first one is the visual learner. The visual learner prefers pictures, images, and spatial understanding. Visual learners learn by watching. Next up, the auditory learner. The auditory learner prefers sound and music. Third, verbal learner. The verbal learner prefers using both words, written and spoken. Next up, the physical learner. The physical learner prefers using their body, hands, and sense of touch. Logical learner prefers using logic, reasoning, and systems. Social learner prefers to learn in groups or with other people. And lastly, the solitary learner. The solitary learner prefers to work alone and use self-study. Thinking about yourself, what kind of learner are you? Are you one of these, or perhaps a combination of 2 or 3? Think about this and answer our survey that is posted on the WYLET Facebook group by the end of today. I'll post the results of it tomorrow on the Facebook group. Next, I'd like you to think about your classroom. To have an engaging classroom that makes learning fun and students' language acquisition increase minute by minute, you must create a student-centered classroom. Studies have shown that the student-centered classrooms result in better achievement by students and higher motivation. How are you going to make your classroom more student-centered? How are you going to make it less teacher-centered? And what's the difference? Well, let's have a look at a short video, and you can see how we can turn a teacher-centered classroom into one that is more student-centered. Now, a little about this video. This was shot on a program that I direct in India called the LEAP program. So if you're wondering what the LEAP program is, it's a short-term English language camp for 50 Afghan youth. The people in it are the teachers, and we created this as part of our teacher training program. We hope you enjoy it. Now pause the tutorial here and go to the WYLET Virtual Workshop Padlet page for classroom management and student motivation. In column 2, you'll see Classroom Management Student Motivation Session 2, Student-Centered Classrooms. Click on the video there and watch the video. When you finish watching the video, click on the tutorial and continue watching the session. I'm sure this video gave you a clearer idea of the difference between a teacher-centered classroom and a student-centered classroom, and you were able to see how much more learning happens in the student-centered environment. Of course, not all of our classrooms are going to be like the one in the video, but student-centered classrooms can be achieved on any level. 4 points to keep in mind when creating a student-centered classroom are: establish a safe and conducive learning environment. Challenge and motivate your students. Evaluate your students and provide feedback. And be prepared, be respectful, be confident. Now let's look at these 4 points in some detail. Establish a safe and conducive learning environment. Create classroom rules or student contracts. Points to emphasize are respect, student to student and teacher to student, language commitment, and holding each other accountable, plus working hard. Establish a routine. Make sure you have objectives, clear instructions, there's warm-ups, and possibly an exit slip. Consider seating. Are you going to have your students in groups, in rows, individuals, circles, or learning centers? Save your voice to get your class's attention. Here are a few techniques I use that I find very effective in the classroom. The first one is, if you hear me, clap. Okay, everybody. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. 3 times. The second one is one of my favorites. I call it, are you ready? So let's look at that.
Is that the first thing you come to?
All right, class. Listen up. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
I said, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Lastly, we have the silent arm. Now this one requires no speaking at all. All you have to do as a teacher is raise your hand quietly. And as you raise your hand quietly, your students will see that and they will raise their hands quietly and focus on you, and they're ready to listen for the next thing you're going to do.
Peanut butter.
I just don't like. I don't like Reese's. I don't like peanut butter.
Yeah,
No,
Reese's
I hate this.
Reese's is good.
Peanut butter crust.
Thank you. How many of these are you already familiar with? What other ones do you know to get students' attention? If you have any ideas or thoughts, please share them on the WYLET Facebook group. Next up is consider learning styles. Thinking about the 7 learning styles we just talked about, you want to change your activities to create some variety, to create some interest in all of your students. And some people suggest that every 15 minutes have a different activity. Acknowledge positive behavior and deal with disruptive students. Remember, you are not glued to the ground. Walking around the room, requesting assistance, giving students tasks, addressing them at eye level are all really effective ways to creating a conducive learning environment. Next, we have challenge and motivating your students. Make learning meaningful. Connect lessons with the real-world issues and students' everyday experiences. Prioritize student responsibility for their learning. Collaborate on classroom and individual goals. Engage the whole class. Encourage the quiet students and struggling students. Challenge your advanced students. Observe, listen. Note that quiet students do not mean they are passive students. Call on them. Assign them in advance to a group or pair. Consider ability levels when grouping or pairing students. Assign roles within the groups. Next up is evaluating your students and providing feedback. What's the difference between evaluate and assess? Well, evaluation is feedback from the instructor to the student about the student's learning. And assessment is feedback from the student to the instructor about the student's learning. There's the difference. You want to ask concept check questions. What are those? They are questions that ask and verify what students already know. Michael, do you understand what we're doing next? Okay, what are we doing? There's an example of a concept check questions. Call on students to repeat the directions. You can do a thumbs up, a thumbs down to decide if something was too easy or too difficult. A checklist on self-evaluation is also important. Exit slips, one of my favorite things to do, is sort of like a way to verify students understood something that was taught in the class before they leave. If they want to leave the class, they leave by repeating some knowledge given by the teacher. Giving feedback. Teachers, it's important to give feedback in a positive, negative, positive way. So you highlight what they did well, you say where they could do better, and then you end with a positive compliment. And also, especially in the language classroom, consider when error correction is important. Is fluency or accuracy the priority? This varies depending on the activity, the topic, the lesson, and also the level of the class. Lastly, be prepared, be respectful, be confident, be relaxed. Know your material, know your students. Know that things never go according to your plan. And know that it's not the end of the world when those plans don't go according to plan. Before we end this session, I'd like to show you something. Why am I showing you a picture of these chefs? Well, I like to think of us teachers as chefs. A good chef uses different recipes and ingredients to make delicious meals. They are always trying new things to challenge their abilities as chefs. When you consider yourself as a teacher, I'd like you to think of you as one of these chefs. We need to show variety in our teaching to ensure that we reach all of our students. One teaching method will not work on all of your students, so you must be flexible and open to trying new ways of teaching. I hope this session has been helpful in getting you started thinking of yourself as a teacher. If you do have any questions for this session, feel free to ask me during the debrief after the lesson planning today. Remember to take the survey on our Facebook page. Thanks for listening, you guys, and see you in our next session.